Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Being a new mom is incredibly hard. There, I said it. It's a struggle and it's different with each and every kid. So how do you know if it's a struggle and that's normal mom life, or how do you know if it's postpartum depression? Our guest today on The PA is In is Breanne Blake. Breanne is a PA and also a mom who had a traumatic delivery, a NICU stay for her baby, and walked through postpartum depression. She's going to share her story with us today and talk about some of the resources that are available for moms. She will give you a little trigger warning before we get into the heart of that topic. But if this is something that doesn't speak to you today or that you're not ready to listen to, feel free to skip this episode and we will see you on the next one. Breanne, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this topic and really looking forward to chatting with everyone today.
So tell us a little bit about you and what you do as a PA and as an educator.
Yeah, so I am a PA. I got my degree from Chatham University in Pittsburgh, and I practiced general medicine essentially and family medicine and urgent care medicine, and then transitioned to academia in 2019, just before I had my second son, and really enjoyed that transition to Slippery Rock University as a assistant professor.
Awesome. So let's talk about how you sort of knew it was time to make a change from clinical medicine to academia and what that looked like. Was it easy, hard to find a job? Tell us about that transition for you.
Yeah, so I kind of got my foot in the door a little early on, especially with a brand new program. Slippery Rock is not an old program. It hasn't been around that long, started in 2016. And I was working in urgent care at the time. So I was working 12-hour shift and found that I loved precepting students. I took students from probably about day one and just really enjoyed sharing that passion of medicine and caring for our patients and just creating that same passion in students too, and noting that yes, I can do that one-on-one with a student, but how much more impactful would I be if I could do that with 52 students every year? So kind of got my foot in the door, saw that Slippery Rock was having people guest lecture, grade, things like that. So I jumped at those opportunities when I could on my days off, which didn't hurt getting a little extra cash, not going to lie, on top of my urgent care clinical practice. And really enjoyed it, just fell in love with it as I was grading and helping them with their techniques and the remediation process, and thought, oh my gosh, I have to get more of this. So I kind of just kept my ear out and listening to local programs of who needed help grading or who might be looking for more of a full-time position. And when it came about at Slippery Rock, I just kind of jumped at the opportunity and went for it right before the pandemic.
It is such a good way to do that if you have the bandwidth to try it out, to go and guest lecture, to go and, sit in on anatomy lab or do something to sort of get a feel for the program and the students. You might not like it, right? So that's a little bit of a way to sort of test the waters and make sure it's really something that you want to do before you sign up for a full-time job.
I completely agree. I think getting your feet wet, if it's something you're thinking about, get your feet wet, absolutely, whether that's guest lecturing or grading or things that way. And when you're giving back to our profession, even just doing that, even if you find out this really isn't a full-time gig for me, but at least you're giving back in that way too, and trying it out and seeing maybe it is something you'll fall in love with.
I am like close to the program that I went to. And so I will do like anatomy lab. I do retroperitoneal dissection and facial dissection because I now do Botox filler and plastic surgery with a lot of facelifts. And I'll do skills lab like suturing and catheter placement. And I find it to be like super fun. And the students have been so like, they're so excited that you're there. They're so eager to learn. When I have a student shadow me who's thinking about becoming a PA, when I have an undergrad student come just to like see what my practice is all about, I always leave like excited about being a PA because they're excited. And it's really a cool dynamic.
Absolutely. Kind of like renews your life in the profession of they're like you're saying, they're just so excited and they just want to like take all the knowledge they can from you and just absorb it in that couple of hours with you shadowing or the weeks that you take them precepting or even just during that lecture because they want to be you. You're living their dream. And I used to say when I would come into the urgent care, I had an MA that wanted to be a PA, and it's sometimes you're tired, you're worn out, and you say things like, she says, how's the day going? Oh, living the dream. And she looked at me one day and she said, yeah, you're living my dream. And that really hit me of like, you're right, I am living somebody's dream out there. And so to really spread that passion and keep it going is an awesome thing to do.
It's such an honor and it's such an important reminder that everyone listening to the show who is a PA had to overcome hurdles to become who you are. And like the former you would be so pumped at like the current you situation, but we see life through our current view. So it's just an important reminder to sort of pause and think like, gosh, when I was a student, I would think it was incredible that I get to do X, Y, or Z today, or that I get to get paid to take care of patients. Because back then I was paying tuition for the opportunity to take care of patients. So it's an important reminder of like just pausing and being grateful for where we are and that perspective that like someone else is trying so hard to become this thing that we have the honor of doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what are your favorite things to teach on? What are you most passionate about or most excited about sharing with your students?
I love teaching on pediatrics. Doesn't matter what module we're in or organ system we're in. I do love pediatrics. I love women's health. I always say I ended up loving every rotation in school. So that's how I think I ended up being more generalist and going family practice and urgent care. But then I'm like, oh man, I really wish I would have did women's health a little bit more. Not that I didn't get to practice a little bit of women's health and family medicine, but I'm like, man, I missed the boat on that. But I'm kind of getting that second wind in academia, getting that opportunity with students. So I love doing that. I did love skills. I used to teach the skills lab, but kind of moved more into lecture with clinical medicine. I love doing skills. I love helping them suture and learn suturing and IVs and everything that way. It was a lot of fun and it was just very exciting. They love being hands-on. I love being hands-on with them. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great to be able to get out of that classroom and actually apply the knowledge that you've been doing. So I want to change gears a little bit and talk about something super personal. And I would love it. I heard you give a lecture on this and you did a really great like trigger warning. Is there a way that you could do that kind of before we dive into this topic for our listeners?
Absolutely. So I always start lectures that are going to have sensitive topics, particularly when I am lecturing either at a conference or to my students, with a trigger warning, because you just don't know where people have been, what walk they have walked. Where they have had their journey. So I always try to be very sensitive to everyone's journey because I just don't know what could maybe be a little bit harder to sit through. So for this topic, we are going to be discussing traumatic birth, NICU experience, postpartum depressions, postpartum psychosis. So if these are things that you find to be a very sensitive topic, I ask that you take a moment, step back from the podcast, ask yourself, do I need to talk to someone? Is there someone I can reach out to? Because this is something that seems to be hitting a button for me. And that tells me, hey, I need that pause, and I should probably look into getting more support and more help with these topics to work through them because they are very hard topics, and that's okay. It's everybody's experience is different with these things.
The PA is In is supported by Mastering the Medical Industry, a digital course made up of the step-by-step plan you've been searching for to get out of clinical medicine and into industry, even with zero experience, including 7 hours of on-demand teaching plus access to a private Facebook community, live group coaching, and even an option for one-on-one coaching with PA and founder Rachel Elaine Jurgensen herself. This course covers it all. Head to onepatientatatime.com/waitlist to save your spot in the next cohort for Mastering the Medical Industry. Yeah, I think that permission, it was so beautiful that you did it. I wished that more people took the time to say, hey, this, and really that's true for any topic, but particularly these ones that have this tendency of being very emotional, very triggering, of just saying like, step away if you need to, take time if you need to, like, don't feel like you have to come back. You don't have to listen to this episode right now, that you can in your own time. If you feel ready, come on back. It's not going anywhere. But like, if today is not your day to listen to that, like, that's okay. It's fine for you to not, listen to this today. So I would love it, Bree, if you would share your personal experience with birth and that trauma and the recovery and how that affected you.
Absolutely. So I have two little guys. Declan is 6 and Arlen is 3. Declan, his pregnancy went beautifully. And I thought I could do labor and delivery over and over again. That wasn't too bad. It was not what I expected it to be. And little did I know, setting myself up for higher expectations that, oh, it'll be fine. Things will be smooth in that second birth and that second delivery. And it did not go that way. Even the pregnancy was a lot more difficult the second time around. And I feel like it brought on more expectation and more pressure on myself because I've done this before. I know how to do this. Why am I feeling this way? Why do I feel more anxious? Like, your body's done this before, Bree. Like, you know what you're doing. You've been through this. You've done the song and dance. And I feel like other moms probably do the same thing in their subsequent pregnancies and deliveries, but we have to give ourselves grace. Each one is different. Just like our children are different, each pregnancy is different. Each labor and delivery is different. So we can't set ourselves up for that. And I totally set myself up for that. So he came 3 weeks early and I thought, these are Braxton Hicks. No way. I'm not in labor. There's not a chance. Went down to the hospital thinking, they'll send me home. It's fine. And get there and they're saying, I think you're in labor. I'm like, really? No way. Mm-mm. And I was induced with my first. So everything was very standard by the clock, everything to a T. And so I never really experienced true labor, I feel like, with my first, but I felt like I did, and had that high expectation. And going through kind of hit some hiccups. And then I went into what's called a precipitous labor or precipitous delivery. So I was at 7 centimeters and 20 minutes later, he was crowning. So things just kind of came on really fast. And he came out sunny side up. So the poor guy, his face was completely bruised to the left side. Very traumatic coming out. He was in respiratory distress, which I always say, being a generalist provider, I know a little bit about everything, but I'm an expert at none. So of course, I feel like in that moment, I was dangerous in my own mind, right? I knew something was going wrong. I knew something was not right. Nobody seemed to have a source of panic though. So I'm like, should I be panicking? Should I not? I'm not quite sure. But he was definitely grunting. He was blue and just was not what I had remembered from my first birth. And subsequently, they rushed him off to the NICU, told me, oh, it'll just be a couple hours. Sometimes they just need to acclimate to oxygen and the world and everything. So I was trying to stay calm. But again, that mom guilt and everything started on instantly for me. Why did my body not do what it was supposed to do? Why did things not go smoothly? I had a baby before. Why am I feeling like, why did this not work the same way? What did I do wrong? That's what I kept at. What did I do wrong? Should I have done something different in the pregnancy? Should I have done something different in the laboring process? I questioned every question that I answered to my providers, right? at one point they asked me, you're slowing down on contractions. We have some options. You can walk the unit for 45 minutes. You can take some morphine and we'll see if we stop your contractions, or you can go home. Well, I live 45 minutes from the hospital, so that didn't seem like a great option. So I was like, I'll walk the unit. And I made that decision. So then I thought, maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I should have went home. Maybe he needed to cook a little longer. And then again, having this medical knowledge, but not being an expert in neonatology, is I started saying to myself, why wasn't it me? I could have had so many complications from this labor and delivery. I could have stroked. I could have had an amniotic embolism. I could have had a PE. I could have died in this process. Why is this poor little new boy in this world? Why is he going through this? It should have been me. I'm the one that made these choices. And I felt like he was being punished for my choices. And that's when the layers started coming on. And I wasn't recognizing those thoughts as being the beginnings of some postpartum depression, and just kind of pushing through because he needed me. He needed me at that time. So you start pushing yourself, and I started pushing my body to the point of he wasn't coming back. They told me, oh, he'll just need a little bit to get acclimated. He's not coming back to my room. So I started to request, I want to go down and see him. And they said, okay, as long as you can sit up, stand up, go to the bathroom, you can go see him. So you better believe I sat up, I stood up, I walked to the bathroom, and I collapsed on that toilet, and I was like, we're okay. To then end up passing out in the NICU because I was pushing. And so, which when I came to, the poor nurse in the NICU said, I don't deal with adults. Do you see how little these are? And I said, I'm sorry. But I was going to do everything I could to get down there to be with him, because again, those ruminating thoughts were, it's my fault. I did something wrong. I have to be there. I have to fix it. And again, I think sometimes as healthcare providers too, we get into overdrive of, we need to know everything. We need to know those charts. We got to see those vitals. We got to be there. And again, I'm no expert in neonatology. That is its own science in and of itself. But I had to be there. So, and then that lasted, I was in the NICU with him for 11 days. He ended up having bilateral pneumothoraces. He was on antibiotics for a little bit because we weren't sure if there was infection. And the NICU and postpartum depression roller coaster is just that, a roller coaster. And that's hopefully what I can get across to listeners too, is the grace that you need to give yourself and others. Is know that there's going to be really great days, and there's going to be great goals, and you're going to hit the marks. And there's going to be other days where it just feels like everything is crashing and you're hitting that low. And they both are just going through those roller coasters together when you're in the NICU, when you're going through postpartum depression. And so each day was something different. There was either a big high because he was meeting his marks, we were able to move forward on things, or we felt like we took 10 steps back. But again, even in those drawbacks, even in those lows, you're not going back to square one. And that's what I hope people realize too. So just because you have that low day doesn't mean you're all the way back to where you started. You're not. It's just one day of a setback, and that's okay. Give yourself grace and move forward. And that was something I really was not good at giving myself, was grace. So every day he ended up being on the critical side of the NICU. I stayed sun up to sundown. I was able to stay overnight with him because he was on the critical side. Which I know not everyone's able to do. Sometimes they're in the other side of the NICU where there's visiting hours and you have to leave. And I can't even imagine how hard I kept trying to prepare myself for getting kicked out. And just that how hard that would be just to walk out of the hospital without your baby. So I definitely give those moms some credit that have been through it because I didn't have to do that. And my own journey was tough, but I understand that journey is just as tough, if not tougher, to have to leave. So just going through that every day, and it was a constant monotony of people coming in, taking vitals, checking weights, changing diapers, changing sheets, checking the machines, everything that way. The monitors going off, the beeping, the lights, very overwhelming, very overstimulating the whole time. And it was interesting, having seen the hospital setting from a provider's perspective, you're only in there for 5 minutes of that person's life, and that person is in there all day. It gives you such a different perspective on our patients and things that way too. So eventually he did get out. He went home on oxygen for 10 days. Unfortunately, after he was off the oxygen, he ended up getting in contact with RSV, probably from older brother in daycare. Went into bronchiolitis and was back in Children's Hospital for 6 days, back on oxygen. So we spent a grand total of about 18 days between two facilities, inpatient, which then, of course, really played more into the postpartum depression aspect of things, because the ruminating thought is always something bad's going to happen. You're always constantly turned on the lookout for he's in distress or something bad's going to happen, or I have to be with him 24/7 because I know what's going to go wrong. Right. And again, as healthcare providers, I think we really beat ourselves up on that we're the ones that can only recognize what's going to go wrong. And we have to rely on others for that.
And I think that's a hard, personally, when I had one of my kids that was hospitalized when she was 28 days old. And during that time period, it was hard to remind myself, you're the parent. You're not the provider. You're the parent. So like, it's okay to ask questions as a parent based on your knowledge as a provider, but you're not making her clinical decisions. You're not responsible for being up to date on viral meningitis. It's not your job, right? You're responsible for making sure your kid gets what they need, but you can't not know all the medicine that you know. So you're like, oh my God, because I remember she was diagnosed with RSV. She was like 26 days old. And I freaked out. I was like, she's so young. Her lungs are so little, kids get, ventilator, all the things, like all the way down the rabbit hole of like all the potential terrible complications. And my husband was internationally traveling at the time. And so I called him freaking out about having a ventilator, the worst possible thing. And he was like, wait, do I need to come home? And I was like, well, some kids with RSV are fine, but it's hard to gauge how concerned do I be about this? And when it is your own kid, personally, I lose all of my objectivity. I cannot make clinical decisions. So I am very diligent. I would rather pay a copay and take my kid to see someone than pretend that I can objectively diagnose them with something.
Oh, 1,000%. I tell my students all the time, when it comes to my kids, or whenever my son, who now subsequently has asthma, when he goes into an exacerbation, it's like all medical knowledge dumps out of my ears, like
I don't know.
gone. I don't even know, like, what's amoxicillin? I don't even know what. I am totally the same way. And I think and that's why they tell us you shouldn't treat family members, because you just lose it. You completely lose it.
Yep. I cannot be objective when it comes to people that I love. I really try not to be the provider. I will be the person who says, like, you should see someone about that. Like, that looks bad. Like,
that doesn't look right.
Get that evaluated, but I'm not going to evaluate it for you. I'll give you general suggestions. So this was a roller coaster. NICU, subsequent, you're home, but you're on oxygen, which is not a relaxed like home. It's like constant monitoring. Do we have enough oxygen? Is he going to run out of oxygen? What are his stats? And then he gets readmitted. You eventually come home. And how did you know something was wrong? Did people in your life say like, hey, you're not seeming like yourself? Like, how did you get to a diagnosis and to the care that you needed?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was hard. And this is something that it's very hard to recognize it in yourself, because we're very easy to say, this is normal motherhood. Yeah, I'm supposed to be tired. Yeah, I'm supposed to feel overwhelmed. Yeah. And you'll make every excuse as it's having a new baby. It's juggling 2 kids. It's juggling 3 kids. You're going to make every excuse. You really do have to step back. And really, it took me laying on the floor crying. And I will never forget this moment ever. Is my brand new baby, who just came home, like you're saying, from another hospital stay, is in one of those bouncers. And I'm laying on the floor trying to bounce with my hand as I'm sobbing uncontrollably. And I'm just begging for help. Somebody please help me. That's when I knew something is wrong. This is not normal motherhood transition. This is not that baby blues that they talk about for the first 2 weeks. This is way more, because I feel like I can't even get my body off the ground. I can't even, if I were to be asked to pick Arlen up at that moment, I don't think I had the strength in my body to even hold this tiny baby. It was just, I had crashed. And I hope to help other mothers and other listeners to not get to that point. Don't let yourself crash that hard. I made every excuse under the sun. I let mom guilt get the best of me, that I had to keep going because this was my fault. So I have to fix it. And that's not okay. That's when you got to stop it before. So when you're having those thoughts of the mom guilt, that I did this, my body's at fault, I am at fault, that's the warning sign right there. Stop right there, and get yourself some help, some therapy and things that way. And that's what I ended up doing is I called a therapist and said, I'm not okay. I don't know what's going on. And we talked through all the signs and symptoms of postpartum depression and where I was at. And of course, there's medication out there too that can help and support in combination with therapy. But therapy is huge. Talking through that, you have to learn how to forgive yourself and how to teach yourself you're not at fault. Let that mom guilt go. It happened. That was just the way it was going to be. There wasn't a right answer or wrong answer when I was sitting in that hospital. It was going to happen. It was a train I couldn't stop. And you got to forgive yourself and give yourself that grace, which I was absolutely not going to. And I was going to fix everything because this was my fault, and I should have stopped that train sooner.
Yeah. I mean, I think hindsight's 2020, and as you're living through it, it's not so clear. I remember in my postpartum periods, I had one where I felt well and one where I realized I didn't feel the same. And it was actually relatively subtle. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I can't function, it's the worst. I was just like, I feel worse. I feel more anxious. I feel sort of less well equipped to handle this. I feel like my margin for error, my margin for freak out or like losing my shit was very small. I just was like, I didn't feel like myself. And I think as new moms, we sort of expect to not feel like ourselves. We sort of expect to be like hormonal and tearful and exhausted. And so it's like, how do we know if this is like, I'm exhausted, I have a new human, I have no idea what I'm doing, or I'm depressed? So, like, what are the criteria, I guess?
Yeah. So you're hitting those signs and symptoms, right? The irritability, having that short fuse where you used to not have that short fuse. And yes, some of that can play into you're tired. And so our fuse does get shorter when we're sleep deprived. But sleep also needs to be a priority. So if you're not sleeping, if you can't sleep because your mind's constantly racing, like for me, it was, is he breathing okay? Let me check the monitor. Let me check this. Let me go in, and I have to put my hand on his back to feel that rise of the chest because I'm just, something bad's going to happen, right? Those ruminating thoughts of something bad happening, or that you're the only person that can care for them because you're going to see those signs. Those are things that are warning signs. And also, I think I had listened to a previous podcast that you and Shonda Morales had done, and talking about sitting up on the bed, putting your feet on the floor, and just taking 1 minute to kind of do a self check in. I think all moms need to do that. I know the baby's screaming and the dog's barking, but 30 seconds to 1 minute to say, can I handle this right now? Right? Let me check in. Am I okay? Can I get up? Can I actually give the care this baby needs right now? And if I can't, then calling in the reinforcements, right? Getting your significant other to come and help. Hey, I need to just lay down again for another 10 minutes. Can you grab the baby? Or if you have family there to support, I just need a little more time because I'm not clear. I'm not thinking clearly, having that trouble concentrating, just feeling in a fog, falling into that hamster wheel of getting up, feeding, diapering, getting up, feeding, diapering. It's starting to lose that joy of this baby too. And again, giving yourself grace there too, because I remember thinking there are people out there who would die to have a baby, to be in my position, who are trying so hard to have a baby. And I'm miserable. Like, I'm miserable. And then you throw more guilt on
Then
yourself.
I should be. I
Yeah.
should feel thankful. I should be happy. I should, yeah.
Right. I should be enjoying every moment, the crying, the blowout diapers, the vomit in my face. I should be enjoying every moment. And you're beating yourself up on that.
Which is such an unreasonable expectation. Like, let's just say, like, no one is out there like, what a blessing, another poopy diaper. Like that is so unreasonable. Like, why are we telling ourselves that the only way to succeed at motherhood is to like even the literally shitty parts? Like, no, that's like unreasonable. That's not how humans work. That's not how our brains work. Like, when you are abruptly awoken from your REM sleep at 2 a.m. because your kid puked, like you're not going to be like, yay, you know, that's not the
Yay!
only way to win at motherhood. Like, it's not normal. You don't have to be a martyr. Like, you don't have to love the crappy stuff. Like, and also it's hard.
Very,
Even
very
when your
hard.
brain is working well, it's hard. Even when you feel like everything's balanced and you're not having postpartum depression, it's hard. And there are hard days. And there are days when you're like, whose idea was this? Like, who decided that kids was a good idea? Like, you know, it's crazy. But yeah, it's not picture perfect. It's not easy even when things are going well. And one other thing I want to ask you about is like, as you were walking through this, like, did you feel supported by your partner or your community? Like, did you have people who did things that really helped you and sort of centered you or made you feel supported during this hard time?
Yeah, so I ended up adding yet another risk factor, a stressful life event. So unfortunately, I was moving through a divorce and divorce process. So that just added more to the postpartum depression. But luckily, luckily, but unluckily, we moved into the pandemic. So my aunt and uncle lived in Virginia, and they had the ability, since everything moved online, to come up and spend a week on, week off with me, week on, week off with me, and completely supported me through all of that and through the process, and helped me with my little guy, again, with his disabilities and his health issues and things that way. And I definitely couldn't have done it without them. You definitely need to find some type of village, whether it's your partner, your spouse, your significant other, a sister, a friend, a mom, an aunt, your neighbor, somebody from church. You definitely need that one person, even if you can just have one, to be your village. You need that person because, two, again, it's so hard to see those postpartum depression symptoms in yourself. So to have somebody educated on it that can look for those signs in you and say, whoa, let's slow down for a second. Do you think you're feeling okay today? Do you think we need to talk to someone? That's so impactful to have that other person just kind of watching out for you, being big brother and just having your back. And so they were my people through all of that and really helped me move through that process and really helped to support me and say, Bree, I don't think you're having a good day today. Do you think you need to talk to your counselor today? And being the person hearing that, you can't take offense, right? That's just somebody looking out, because a lot of times too, because your brain is just in that fog, you're in this fight or flight mode, you want to fight, you can't jump to, well, why would you accuse me of that? Like, there's nothing wrong. They're looking out for you. So just taking that step back, taking that deep breath, doing that self check-in of, am I okay? Why are they saying that? And checking in with that therapist if you have one on board, or getting one on board when you need it.
Yeah, I think those, first of all, raising your hand and saying, I'm not okay and I need help and I can't handle things continuing the way that they have been, and saying to people who know you and love you, like, I need help from you. Like, how can you support me in this season? And also that therapy. Because I think the thing that therapy has done for me is it has helped me to realize myself when it's like I'm not having a good day, or I'm not really equipped to handle this conversation or this situation. This is not a good situation to put myself in. It has helped me to realize that sooner, which sort of helps you to stay out of trouble, and also helps you not to like blow up your relationships because you can start to say like, no, I don't think this is a conversation I should have today. I don't think this is a discussion I should get into today. I am not in a place where this is going to go well. So just like getting in the habit of consistently, how am I doing? What do I need? How can I ask specifically for what I need? Because I think in these situations, sometimes we're just like, I don't know, right? I don't know. I'm too overwhelmed. I'm so depressed. I can't function. And people are like, how can I help? And you're like, I literally don't even know. Like, I don't know what to ask for.
Or you just blow up and you're like, if I knew, I would just do it. But you're like, I can't right now. And I think, like you're saying, therapy just gives you permission to put yourself first. And again, as moms, we really struggle with that, right? Like it's always the kids first, kids, this appointment, this doctor's appointment, this practice, going to school, dropping them off, and you forget about you. And like you're saying, what do I need? What do I need to continue to move forward? And so therapy just finally gives you kind of that permission to be like, hey, you can't continue to pour from an empty cup. Or that analogy of the plane's going down and you got to put your oxygen on first. So true. You have to put your oxygen on first before you can put your kid's oxygen on. Because if you're passed out, there's nobody helping your kid.
No one's breathing.
Right?
Yep.
So, and I think we have to get better at giving permission. We have to get better at talking about these hard subjects and knowing that it's okay as a mom to put yourself first. It's okay.
We interrupt this broadcast with a very important announcement. You are not making enough money. Your practice and your physician do not understand the value you are adding to their patients, and therefore, you aren't earning what you're worth. If in the past your requests for a raise have been met with one single word, no. If you're working more hours than ever and seeing more patients, but you're not making any more money and you're feeling pissed about it. If you feel like you've hit the ceiling of your income band, this guide is for you. I've compiled the 5 most costly and most common mistakes that PAs make when asking for a raise, and I've told you how to avoid them and what to do instead. Download your free guide at tracybingaman.com/mistakes. And modeling that is what we would want our kids, modeling that is what we want our kids to see also. Like, I don't want my kids to grow up and think the only way to be a parent is to completely sacrifice everything you are for your kids. Like, I want my kids to see someone who is like passionate and their own individual and like leaves the house without them and goes out into the world to exist without them. Like, and that they see that. My kids the other day were like, what were you before you were a mom? Like what, like, which is like an interesting question because they've only existed, right, since I've become a mom.
Right.
So I was like, well, I was a person, and I was like, wait, actually, I am a person. I'm in fact still a person, I'm still a person with like friends and hobbies and passions. And I want them to have that life. And in order for them to see that as a possibility, I have to live that life.
True. So true. Very true.
Yeah. So what support or like resources? So someone is like listening and they're like, I don't know, who do they call? Where do they go? Like, what can they Google or what site can they go to if they're like, I'm wondering if I meet the criteria for postpartum depression or psychosis or anxiety, any of these things, especially in that postpartum period?
Yeah. Well, I think backing that up a little too, to the caregivers and people around them, like we were discussing, I think each person can kind of be in a category. And I got this from Beyond the Blues, a book that helped me prepare for my lectures and things at PSPA. Like first to the spouses and support is don't think you have to fix it, but you can love and you can support it. And this also goes back to what love language does your spouse have? What fight language do they have? Because again, the symptoms being irritable, the loss of concentration, the fatigability is they're not going to be thinking clearly. So sometimes it's going to be jumping to that fight, right? So does your spouse like a hug? Do they like being left alone? Do they need their space when they're at that point? And respecting that. But in the same respect, not taking it personally. Because of course we can take those things personally of, she doesn't want to talk to me. She doesn't like me. Like she's upset with me. It's not that. Again, she's not thinking clearly at the moment. It's not anything you did. And again, remember the ruminating thoughts that she's going to be having too about something bad happening to baby. It doesn't mean that you're a bad parent or you can't do it. So don't take that personally either. And then also taking time for themselves, right? That they have to do self-care too, because they're taking care of mom who's going through this journey of postpartum depression and baby. So really taking time for themselves too, and not pouring from their own empty cup. So then everybody's pouring from an empty cup. So that would be my big take for spouses and partners and support. And also just being realistic on expectations too. One thing that my aunt said in the time is the dishes will be there in the morning, right? Because we had this whole other life, like you were saying about your kids, like what were you before? Well, I used to have a really clean house and clean sink without dishes and an empty dishwasher and clothes that weren't, in a heap somewhere.
Waiting to be
Right?
folded,
And
hoping someone will fold them. Yeah.
Right. Like we call it Mount Tide at our house, where it's clean, but you kind of got a grab bag. You get what you get. So you used to have all that control, right? And now we're adjusting to this very needy human being, and we got to let some things go. So really helping, whether you're a family member, whether you're a spouse, to really help set expectations. It's okay. Give yourself permission and grace to leave the dishes in the sink. And let me tell you, when my aunt said that and I woke up the next morning, I was like, you know what? The house didn't fall apart. It's okay. There's not like rabid animals at the sink. It's okay. So giving that permission. Family and friends, it's wonderful when they come over and they want to love on baby, and that is really helpful. Keep that going, right? It's all exciting in the first couple of weeks, but keep going. Keep checking in on her. Call her. How's it going? How are things going? Is there anything you need? And just surprise them. Surprise them with dinner. Do the dishes when you're over. All of those things. Don't ask permission. Do you want me to do the dishes? Of course. She's going to say, oh, no, I'll get them. Right? Just do it. Go for it. And then to the providers, we need to screen early, often. Right now, there's no real standard on screening for postpartum depression. And two, I think we have to change mindset, which some literature out there is kind of moving towards peripartum versus postpartum, because this can be diagnosed in pregnancy. So we can catch them early and help them through that postpartum period. So the Postpartum Support International, they say we should screen in each trimester, the 6-week postpartum check, and then all the way up to a year at those pediatric visits. And we see, postpartum can go all the way up to that first year of life. So really getting on screening would be helpful on a provider aspect. And then we'll go through resources, like you're saying, for providers within the areas and things to reach out for. And then to the mamas out there, your own support, right? If you're considering being a mama, if you're a current mama, if you're pregnant and getting excited for that baby, and again, every pregnancy is different, is be your own advocate. You know your risk factors. You know if you've had postpartum depression in the past. You know if you've had anxiety or depression in the past. You know if you're going through a stressful life event. Flag your provider. Providers, look for those flags in the EMR system. Mama's got to advocate for themselves. We advocate for those babies, but we got to advocate for ourselves too. And also help teach those around you what to look for. Education is huge. Providers and mamas, what should they look for in you? I can now tell people how that journey was and what to look for when I'm going downhill. So if I ever got pregnant again, here
are my signs.
Yes.
Here's the warning sign. Yeah.
Yes. And that way people can flag and say, hey, Bree, it's time to stop. So back to your question about what resources to the providers is, we have several resources within Pennsylvania that I'm most familiar with. We have the Alexis Joy Center at West Penn, which is specific to postpartum depression. We have intensive outpatient therapies within the area. There is a new infusion treatment that came out just a few years ago that is for more severe postpartum depression. So there are centers, they have to be certified to administer that infusion. So there are several in the Pennsylvania area that can do that. Just looking for, there are several, even if you just Google maternal mental health providers, looking for a specific provider that can help your patient or you yourself as a mom through that. I'm not saying that general psychologists and psychiatrists aren't great. They can still help you, but having someone who has that background is so beneficial and so helpful. Because they know what to look for. They know what to educate others on. You can actually get a certification now as providers that came out, I believe, in 2018 through Postpartum Support International, which actually gives you an indication. So you can look for this behind the letters behind people's names, PMH-C, showing that they've sat for an exam, they've gone through the trainings on postpartum depression and postpartum other mood disorders as well. So you can look for that indication too. Mommy and me groups can be great, can also be a little bit of a downfall. Right? So looking for a specific mommy and me group for moms with postpartum depression. And again, those resources and centers will have those. Not saying that mommy and me groups aren't great if you just have one in your neighborhood, but when you're feeling really bad and again, guilty of like, why am I not happy with having this beautiful baby? And you go in and every mom's smiling and cooing and they look perfect. Their hair's done, their makeup's done, and you have mascara from like 3 days ago. And you're like barely keeping it together. You got vomit on your shirt that you haven't showered in 4 days. You just feel 10 times worse. So being very mindful in what mommy and me group that we're referring to or resource that we're having reach out. So those are big resources, I think, around the areas. We definitely need more. I mean, the Alexis Joy DeKeely Center is one of the only ones that I'm aware of in the US. We really need to start getting more and getting that rolling more, especially because it's huge, right? We say 1 in 7 moms is going to have postpartum depression. And we think that's underdiagnosed, right? One, because I've heard so many moms after giving that presentation, and even my own students say, I was not honest on the Edinburgh.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that blew my mind.
Your baby, they just ask you how they're eating. You're like, oh, yeah, here you go.
Yeah. Like crazy. And two, some have this fear that if I answer correctly and I'm going to be labeled as postpartum depression, they're going to take my baby away. Right? And that blows my mind. That is absolutely not the scenario. They are not going to take away your baby. The only way they're going to take away a baby is if you're going to be harmed to them or yourself. And that's a temporary thing, right? Until things get back to even keel. So really getting more information out there, getting more services like that would be prime.
Yeah. And the power of you coming on here and being willing to share your story is that we're saying, hey, this happens and people recover and they go on to lead normal lives with very, great relationships with their kids. So I'm so appreciative of your vulnerability and your willingness to share about your story and also, kind of pairing your experience as a mom with your experience as a PA and your knowledge and background. So thank you so much, Bree, for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Tracy. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for letting me share my story. If I can even help just one other mom out there seek help and know that it's okay and it does get better, I promise, that means the world to me.
There is so much power in connection and community as moms, in sharing stories of other people who have struggled and not done it perfectly and figured it out along the way. I love being able to use this platform to share my own imperfections as a mom and to share stories of other people who have struggled and triumphed and are normalizing the fact that not every day is beautiful and fantastic and rainbows and unicorns as a mom. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The PA Is In. I will see you next time. Congratulations. You've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA Is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.